Welcome everyone to the August meeting of the Mansfield Shire Council. Very warm welcome to all those online. Very warm welcome to councillors. Warm welcome additionally to the CEO, Caitlin Conrick, to the General Manager of Infrastructure and Planning, Kirsten Alexander, to the General Manager of Community and Corporate Services, Kurt Heidecker, and also to our Coordinator of Governance and Risk, Ms. Michelle Kane. If we can start the meeting, if I can call on each councillor and ask them to confirm verbally that they can see all councillors and hear the proceedings. Councillor Ravi.
I can see all councillors and officers and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Sladden.
I can see all councillors and officers and can hear the proceedings.
Councillor Tian.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I can see all councillors and council officers and hear the proceedings.
Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I can hear the proceedings and see all councillors and council officers.
Thank you. If I can ask each councillor to confirm by raising their hand that they could all hear each statement of the councillors. Councillor Ravi. Thank you. Councillor Sladden. Thank you. Councillor Tian. Thank you. And Councillor Webb. Thank you. Councillors, could I call on the CEO for any apologies?
No apologies, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'll read the statement of commitment and ask each councillor to confirm. As councillors of Mansfield Shire, we are committed to ensuring our behaviour meets the standards set by the Mansfield Shire Councillor Code of Conduct and Councillor Charter. We will at all times faithfully represent and uphold the trust placed in us by the community. Councillor Ravi.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I confirm my commitment.
Councillor Sladden.
I confirm my commitment, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Tian.
I affirm my commitment, Mr Mayor.
And Councillor Webb.
I affirm my commitment, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Item 5 is the Acknowledgement of Country. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Tan, will you recite the council Acknowledgement of Country?
Certainly, Mr Mayor. Our meeting is being held on the lands of the Tungarong people, and we wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. We would also like to pay our respects to their elders past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today.
Thank you, Councillor Tan. Item 6 is disclosure of conflicts of interest. If I can ask each councillor in turn and ask them to declare whether they have any conflicts of interest. Councillor Ravi.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I have no conflicts of interest on any agenda items listed tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Sladden.
I have no conflicts of interest in relation to any agenda items, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Tian.
I have no conflict of interest in relation to any of the agenda items tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I have one very minor conflict I should disclose. Item 13.3.3, the digital transformation strategy. It is only a report coming to council for acknowledgement, but I need to declare that I work for a company mentioned in the report, Isimo.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Confirmation of minutes. Can we have a motion confirming the confirmation of the minutes, please? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Motion being that the minutes of the Mansfield Shire Council meeting held on 20th of July 2021 be confirmed as an accurate record, noting the amendment of the Assemblies of Councillors report to acknowledge that Councillor Sladden submitted a formal apology for the Governor's visit on 1st July 2021 and for the NAIDOC Week activities.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ravi. Would anyone like to speak to the motion? All those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. The Mayor's report, item 10. Is there any questions or comments on that report, councillors? Councillor Raby?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've got a comment on your report. The people out there that may not have the agenda in front of them, with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to read out the final paragraph, which states, "Finally, I'd like to apologise for the inconvenience to residents as a result of the footpath renewal outside the post office and police station on High Street. The contractor awarded this project has been very disappointing and not met with standards or timeframes required for council. As such, the contractor has been removed from the job and now replaced." I just wanted to read that out, Mr. Mayor. There's been a fair bit of consultation to me over that, and I'm glad that you put that apology in. I think it's, I know that all councillors feel the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raby. If there's no more comments or questions on that report, do we have a motion, please, councillors? Councillor Turn?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that council receive the Mayor's report for the period 20th of July 2021 to the 9th of August 2021.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Raby? Would anyone like to speak to the motion? Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 11, reports from council appointed representatives. The Goulburn Murray Climate Allowance meeting. Is there any progress on that, Councillor Webb?
No, Mr. Mayor, we are meeting on Thursday for our AGM. I'll have an update for our next council meeting.
Thank you. The Hume Regional Local Government Network, that is also meeting this Thursday as well. So there's nothing to report on that. Councillor Sladen, the Lake Eildon Land and On-Water Management Plan Implementation Committee.
The next meeting is in September.
September. Thank you. The Mansfield Shire Council Audit and Risk Committee, that meeting is also occurring this Monday. So there's nothing further to report on that. Mansfield Shire Business and Community Recovery Advisory Committee. I don't think there's anything on that, Councillor Sladen.
No, Mr. Mayor, other than there's an evaluation process underway of that group.
Thank you. The MAV, the only thing, there's been nothing there regarding that committee, though we, as mentioned in my report, the president of the MAV visited Mansfield in the last couple of weeks, and my understanding that was his first visit of a president to Mansfield, or president of the MAV to Mansfield, and it was just more a meet and greet. Councillor Raby, the North East Local Government Waste Forum.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. The last meeting was last Tuesday, which I chaired. It was a number of agenda items that will influence or have for Mansfield. There was a presentation from the Waste to Energy, which is a Delwip. Luke Wilson from Delwip gave that presentation. It was very interesting, and it was about the 1 million tonne cap for waste going to landfill that they're working on to turn that waste into energy so that will go back into the grid. I'd like to point out that Delwip, if you look on their website and type in waste to energy, you'll find a lot of information about that. It's very interesting. The other thing that we had in the meeting was the curbside reform, which is about our new bins, about curbside reform, support funding coming from the government, also Recycling Victoria for 4-stream household recycling services and waste minimalisation. So that's basically separating glass and foodstuffs, organics, co-mingles, which are your recycles. We also had a guidance on that and the new environmental laws session that was briefly announced with respect to capping landfills. We have 6, as you know, so that is being looked at by the Victorian government as well as the Waste Committee. Recycling Victoria, the outcome of round 1 of the Recycling Victoria Councils and Communities Funds was announced by the Minister on the 15th of July. A number of projects were successful in the northeast region, but one that is solely applicable to the Mansfield Shire is an amount of $20,000 for the waste infrastructure audit, assessing public street bin usage to better equip council to manage surges in waste from tourism. So that's a great outcome for the Shire to be able to look at that. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Raby. And the Rural Councils of Victoria, there's nothing to report on that. Councillors, do we have a motion regarding these reports? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Motion being that council note the verbal reports provided by councillors in relation to their representation on external committees.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Seconder? Councillor Sladen. Would anyone like to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 12 is public question time. We have 3 questions from the public. The first question is from Ms. Michelle Harmer, and the question is, will council fly the rainbow flag, the rainbow pride flag, I should say, from council office on the 17th of May next year, being International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia? Council's answer to that is, council currently has 2 flagpoles at its main administration centre in High Street, Mansfield, flying the Australian flag and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag. It also has 3 flagpoles in front of the station precinct on the entrance to Mansfield from Melbourne, where council flies, in addition to the Australian and Aboriginal and Torres Strait flag, the Tongarang flag recently gifted to council. This council supports diversity, inclusion and condemns discrimination. Over the past few years, many councils have taken to raising the rainbow flag on International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. We thank you for bringing this matter to council. Council will plan to purchase a rainbow flag and raise it on the 17th of May 2022, International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia, as a symbol of our support for greater inclusion. Thank you, Ms. Harmer. The second question is from Mr. William Copley at the Mansfield Men's Shed. Sorry. The question is, thanks for addressing this question submitted on behalf of the Mansfield Men's Shed. The council land at 17 Errol Street, leased to Mace, who was acting as the auspicer to the then Men in Sheds group, was for a period of 10 years with options for 2 renewals. As there is no evidence of a compliant renewal application or payment, will the council confirm that lease is now in overholding, as defined by the lease? The answer is, council has received legal advice stating that the lease is now in overholding. The third and final question is from Mr. William Copley from Mansfield Men's Shed and submitted on behalf of the Mansfield Men's Shed. Mansfield Community Men's Shed Inc. has declared and given notice to both Mace and the Shire that it is the beneficiary of an auspice agreement with Mace. Will the Shire act expediently to terminate the lease with Mace and reissue a new peppercorn lease to Mansfield Community Men's Shed and thereby give them security of tenure so that they may continue to invest in the property? Thank you. Council's response to the question is that this matter will be the subject of a report to Council at its 21st of September 2021 meeting. Until Council receives a report and considers the matter, there is no Council position to communicate. And thank you also to Mr. Copley for those questions. Item 13 is officer reports. Councillors, are there any questions regarding the CEO's report? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions, probably to be directed to Ms. Kirsten Alexander. Just the capital works table you've got there. I noticed there's a few projects which aren't listed, things like Lord's Stadium, the Dual Court Stadium, Bonington Community Centre, Alsa Street Kindergarten, that were on previous reports and not complete. Could you fill us in?
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Those projects are carryover projects. I understand that report was prepared just showing the new projects for 21-22. We certainly can give an update on the carryover projects. It's normal practice that Council puts those carryover projects up for approval. I think that's at the September meeting we'll be putting those up. But we will absolutely give you an update, and our Manager Operations and Capital Works is here and can give just a brief update on those key ones that you mentioned. So I'll hand over to Christian Burchett.
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I do have completion dates for a couple of those key projects. The big one, View Street, looks to be finishing up now with asphalt plan for next week, which means that given some bits and pieces with line marking, etc., by about the 17th of September, we should be completely out of there. There are a few little added bits, but by September 17th, we're substantially complete. Last update meeting we held with VSBA and the secondary college on the Dual Court Stadium. They indicated that there was about 2 weeks worth of work left to get the stadium completed. That was in July, so I was expecting to have scheduled a PC walkthrough by about now. We haven't had that walkthrough yet, but we'll be reaching out to the contractor to see when we can get in there and make sure we complete that PC walkthrough.
Thanks, Christian. Councillor Webb, you had another question?
Just another small one just to bring up. I know last meeting I requested a bit more information on youth services to be included in the CEO's report, the services we're delivering and their attendance and their effectiveness. I notice it's not in this report either, so if somebody could please look into that and include the numbers in the next report, I'd really appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Tan?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a question through you to the CEO regarding the Community Economic Development report. In this section, it talks about the courses that are the delivery partners and what they've provided in terms of webinars, networking events, drop-in sessions, online workshops, etc. And I'd just be interested to know the participation rates. They don't. It's not mentioned in here, but obviously there's a lot of emails and a lot of work being done there. But it's hard to tell whether it's how well it's been received.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Teen, for the question. I'll take that on notice and provide councillors with a report in the interim, but include it in the next CEO report as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? If there's no further questions, councillors, do we have a motion? Councillor Sladen?
You're on mute, Paul.
You're on mute, Paul.
Sorry about that. I lost my screen. Okay. The council receive and note the Chief Executive Office report for the period 20th of July 2021 to the 9th of August 2021.
Thanks, Councillor Sladen. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tan? Would anyone like to speak for or against that motion? Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. Thank you, Christian, for your attendance. Item 13.2 is infrastructure and planning and refers to the commercial industrial land use strategy, the implementation of that through the Mansfield planning scheme. The responsible officer is Melissa Crane, the Manager of Planning and Environment. Welcome, Melissa. Councillors, do we have any questions regarding this? No questions? I believe, Ms. Crane, I believe, Ms. Crane, that there's an item there that isn't quite correct in the recommendation.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. In the recommendation, item 0.3 refers to amendment C50. That's a typographical error. It should read C51. So when in the recommendation, so I respectfully request if that could be amended to be C51 in the agenda, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Councillor Sladen?
No, it's okay, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to raise that point, but you raised it.
Thank you. Councillors, if there's no other questions, do we have a recommendation? Do we have a motion, please? Councillor Rabi.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Recommendation that council request under section 8A2 and 3 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 that the Minister for Planning authorise Mansfield Shire Council to prepare amendment C51 to the Mansfield Planning Scheme. 2, notify the Minister for Planning that when it exhibits amendment C51, Mansfield Shire Council intends to give full notification of the amendment under section 19 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 for a minimum statutory exhibition period of 1 month. And 3, when authorised by the Minister for Planning, exhibit amendment C51 to the Mansfield Planning Scheme under section 19 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987.
Thanks, Councillor Rabi. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Turn. Councillor Rabi, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only that I'm again incredibly impressed by the work that the officer does in planning, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rabi. Councillor Turn, do you wish to speak? You're on mute, James.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, I'd just like to say that it's a pleasure to second this this strategy. There's been a lot of work going to this, particularly from its initial design and content. It's changed a lot through the way, and I think it's ended up as a really good product. So I'd like to congratulate all the officers who took part in that and fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Turn. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Any other councillor like to speak for the motion? Councillor Raby, as the mover of the motion, would you like a last reply?
No, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you, councillors. And thank you, Ms. Crane. Item 13.2 is Bill Maxwell's house at Bonnydoon Community Centre. Councillors, do we have any questions on this? No questions? Do we have a motion? Councillor Sladen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that council provides in principle approval for the relocation of the timber dwelling from 31 Arnott Street, Bonnydoon, to the Bonnydoon Community Centre grounds at 75 Arnott Street, Bonnydoon.
Thank you, Councillor Sladen. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tiernan? Councillor Sladen, would you like to talk to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would. The building in question, as per the report, it's quite an old house and was one of the original houses. In fact, it was the last house to be moved from the lake bed when in the 50s when they did the extension to the weir. In fact, it was the last one. It was moved in such a hurry that it was actually moved and placed, so it is actually back to front. So it faces Arnott Street. It's actually the rear of the building instead of the front of the building. Mr. Maxwell, long-term resident, and also a very kind benefactor to a number of Bonnydoon community groups. And sadly, upon his passing, the community group, as per the letter to council, would like to utilise that building as a museum to host a number of historical items around from the Bonnydoon area. And yes, I think it's a good move and a good use of that building. And the fact that it's not going to be at any cost to council is even better. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sladen. Councillor Tiernan, would you like to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to say what a great idea this is, but on behalf of the Bonnydoon community. I knew Bill Maxwell quite well. He was a real character. He had an incredible memory. If you had a sport event that you didn't know who did what, or he did. So he was impeccable with dates, and it was a great gesture of him for this to be going as to the historical context. And yeah, having had past history with the water coming up and flooding houses, I think it's a great idea, and I think that the public will show a lot of interest in that in the future. So it's a great initiative.
Thanks, Councillor Tiernan. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Anyone else like to speak for the motion? Councillor Sladen, would you like to wrap up?
Oh, no, I'll leave it as it is. I think the report states it all. And as Councillor Tiernan said, it's a good use of the building.
Thank you. Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3.1 is the draft council plan 2021-25. Responsible officer is the General Manager of Community and Corporate, Kurt Heidaker. Kurt, thank you for that. I think this is the first official report you've presented to council, I think, under...
It is, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
And thank you. Councillors, are there any comments on this or questions? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Heidecker. I know I voiced my concerns when this was brought to briefing regarding the measurables around the council, around the plan items. In my view, if we're going to aim to achieve something, we need to measure what we're trying to achieve. And sort of on the second last page of the report, there's a handful of items which have made it into the report to measure. In my view, it's not comprehensive, and it misses quite a few items within the plan that we should be measuring. Not going to mean it shouldn't go out to the community for consultation, but I think we just need to double check those measurables to make sure that we're achieving what we set out to achieve.
Thank you, councillor.
Any other questions, councillors? No questions? Do we have a mover of the motion, please? Councillor Sladen? Councillor Sladen?
I must apologise. I am having internet issues, Mr. Mayor. Okay, sorry. So the motion is the council endorses the release of the draft council plan 2021 to 2025 for public exhibition and feedback from the 18th of August 2021 to the 8th of September 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sladen. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Turn. Councillor Sladen, would you like to talk to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is it's the draft council plan. It's the first plan of this new council, and I do encourage people to have a very close look at it and to study it. I believe there are some excellent initiatives that are in this council plan, but we would certainly value feedback. So please take the opportunity to read it and provide that feedback. And we look forward to it coming to the October meeting, if I'm correct, for adoption. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Sladen. Councillor Turn is the seconder. Would you like to speak?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Any other councillor like to speak for the motion? Councillor Sladen, would you wish to say anything else?
No, thank you.
Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thanks, councillors. Item 13 point. Item 13 point. Sorry? Are you guys getting an echo there?
I think it might be Councillor Sladen's microphone, perhaps, if he muted it.
Thank you. Item 13.3.2 in the proposed financial plan. The responsible officer is the Manager of Business and Performance, Amanda Kindersley. Welcome, Ms. Kindersley. Councillors, do we have any questions on the financial plan document, please? No questions? Councillor Ravi?
Yes, sorry about that. I've got a question for Ms. Kinsley. I'm just trying to find it. Quite a comprehensive document. Okay, so sorry, Mandy, I'm just trying to find my question that I had written down here for you. Yeah, so on the policies in the available funds, the forecast from 2021 to 2030 to 31, with a low point of 4.1 million in the available funds. My reading of this, that it indicates that there would be no cash issues. Is that your your idea as well? Is that your view?
Ms. Kinsley?
Sorry, can you point me to what page you're looking at, please, Councillor?
Yeah, Mandy, it hasn't got a in my attachment. Oh, hang on. Yes, it has. It's 8 of 48.
Pardon? Page 48?
8 of 48, yeah. Page
8.
Yeah. So halfway down in the available funds column, running from left to right, the low point is 25-26 at 4.1 million. But I don't see any problems there. So my question is that my reading of this 10-year plan indicates that there are no cash issues. Would you say that that's correct?
So based on the data underpinning that long-term financial plan, that's correct, that it hasn't fallen, the cash hasn't fallen below what we call the $3 million cash floor. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ravi. Any other questions? Do we have a motion, please, councillors? Councillor Tam?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that Council 1 formally prepare the proposed financial plan 2021-31 for the purposes of Section 91 of the Local Government Act 2020, and 2, place the proposed financial plan 2021-31 on exhibition for the period of 28 days and call for public submissions.
Thank you, Councillor Tan. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ravi? Councillor Tan, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just to say well done to Ms. Kinsley and her department for preparing this. It's been up and down and through the ringers a bit, but we finally got there, and yeah, I think it shows that council's in a very strong position, especially as Councillor Raby just highlighted, in available funds going forward for 10 years. So that's good.
Thanks, Councillor Tan. Councillor Raby, would you like to say it?
I'd like to mirror Councillor Tan's comments, Mr. Mayor, and also point out that the plan is a 10-year plan, so it is fluid. Over time, it'll be taking into account future projects that may arise within that 10-year period. I'd also like to thank Mandy and her team. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Raby. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Would any other councillors like to speak for the motion? Councillor Sladen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, again, I echo the other councillors' comments in congratulating Ms. Kinsley and her team on this. And it is something that does shape us for the next 10 years based on the assumptions that are listed in the report. And I do look forward again to the feedback from the public and the deliberative engagement process that is required to be undertaken as part of it going out on public release. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Sladen. Councillor Tan, would you like to wrap it up?
No, that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you. Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thanks, councillors.
Mr. Mayor, if I could come in just now. Councillor Webb earlier on declared a conflict of interest, or it was a little bit unclear. So perhaps if you could ask Councillor Webb to clarify whether he does have a conflict, material or general, or does not, or just just that it's a mention of a business that's, because it is a general report. Thank you.
Through you.
Thanks, Madam CEO.
Through you,
Councillor
Mr.
Webb.
Mayor. It is just a mention in the report. I don't believe it is a direct conflict, and I don't believe I need to step out for the report. Happy to discuss it and be proven otherwise, but it's just a very general indication, just for everyone's knowledge.
So thank you, Councillor Webb. So from that, Councillor, Mr. Mayor, I'm taking it that Councillor Webb is not declaring a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Are there any questions on this report? Councillor Ravi?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I understand it is only a report, but it's the workshop with senior leadership group at ISIMO. Is that for councillors to attend, and what is the cost for that? Do we know, or is it too early to tell?
I can talk to that if that's.
Yes, sorry, Ms. Kingsley. Yep.
Through the mayor, no, there's no intention for councillors to attend that workshop. It's a brainstorming workshop with the leadership team to identify any issues and potential solutions that we can use tech to address. And at this stage, there's been no discussion on cost.
Thank you.
Councillor Tan?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Kinnersley. I noticed in the effective and efficient ICT service delivery section, it talks about procurement for a consultant to facilitate the project will commence in 2021. And it's referring to the complete rollout of Office 365. But I think that from my understanding, we've already spent 80,000 in the in rolling that out. So what's this procurement consultant, this consultant going to perform there in that role?
Yep, through the mayor. So there's budget in this financial year to do the Office 365 rollout, which might be the 80K you're referring to. So it's been adopted for this financial year. We have some modules of the 365 suite rolled out, but not the full contingent. So we will be going out to procurement for a provider to help us. We've got the licensing, but we haven't rolled out the full functionality, and to help us assess exactly which modules we should be using and how best to modify our processes and workflows to then fit with that suite of products.
Okay, so I take it that consultant will be included in the 80,000, or is this going to be additional to that initial sum?
It's all included in the budget that was adopted. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Slayton, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Kinnersley, reading the report, the overarching policy that's going to be developed, I know that your report does state that it includes but doesn't limit the following, and then there's a whole list. But one area that seems to jump out at me as not being included, and that is the area of data breach and how data breach, I mean, you've got cyber security there listed, but data breach does not necessarily equate to the same as cyber security. So I'm just pointing out that data breach as part of that overarching policy is included.
Certainly, Councillor, I would expect it would be, but I'll make a note of that and make sure that does get included.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions? Do we have a motion? Councillor Slayton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion is the council receive and note this report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ravi? Councillor Slavin, would you like to speak to the motion?
We're only receiving and noting it, Mr. Mayor, so no, there's nothing further to say. The actual strategy is attached. Thank you.
Councillor Ravi, would you like to add anything? Those in favour, those against the motion? Sorry, those against the motion? Those in favour? Motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3.4, the Community Recovery Plan. The responsible officer is the Senior Coordinator of Community Economic Development, Saskia Van Beaver. Welcome, Saskia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just one, and understanding there may be confidential information around it. Our Community Development Coordinator recruitment, is that underway? Are we expecting to have somebody on board in that soon?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We have completed the process, so the person has been appointed and will be starting in 4 weeks.
Very good, thank you.
Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Ravi?
Yeah, I've got a question about the financials of this plan. I can't understand how the plan can be implemented without finance. So is there any money unaccounted for in the fund for this, or Saskia? I can't see any detail.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. So all the funding required for these projects actually comes from external funding. So under the financial section, I have outlined the different funds it will be coming from. So CASI funding has some funding left over. So we have it's because we don't need a lot of funding. So just for the community groups, workshops, so just for location fee, if there is a fee, or some catering, and then for the event side, some minor cost as well. So that will be CASI. Then a partnership with Alpine Valley Community Leadership. So they have provided us, the whole partnership is worth $10,000, but about $2,000 of that partnership will be utilised for these professional development opportunities. And then the freezer is funding from the youth services. So that is existing funding that they receive every year. I believe they have to reapply for it, but it's a yearly fund. And so some of the actions that came out of this plan are actually in line with actions that fit within that funding. So that's really where all the funding comes from. And then the staff that was employed for the recovery projects, that came from working for Victoria. So now it will be handed over to the community development person.
Okay, so through you again, Mr. Mayor. So Saskia, you mentioned that there is a surplus left over. How much is there?
Through Mr. Mayor, excuse me, which surplus in what funding are you inquiring about?
I think you just said when you started answering my question that there was a surplus, some funding left over that hadn't gone out. Is that correct? Or is it all fully expended?
So no, there's still some funding left from CASI, from Alpine Valley, and from Freezer. So that is yet not expended yet.
Oh, okay. So how much is that?
I'm not sure what the full amount is for CASI, but what we expect to be utilising for this project for Kazi would be a maximum of $1,500. The Alpine Valley Leadership would be $2,000 and Freezer would be around $3,000.
Thank you.
Councillors, is there any other questions? Saskia, I just had a question following on from Councillor Rabi. And I don't know if it's the same question, but of the money, the funding that we've got, the grants that we've got for community recovery and what we've expended so far, what hasn't been expended? What's left over out of that total pool of community recovery funds?
From the community recovery and resilience funding, that is fully expended. So that was $200,000 that all went to community groups for events. So that's all been expended now. And then we had $200,000 in immediate exceptional assistance and immediate response funding. So that has been so $100,000 has gone to Highline events, and then the additional $100,000 we have requested to be reallocated, which has been approved by council in, I believe, the previous meeting. And so we are still awaiting approval from the funding body. They have given in principle approval, but not full approval yet, so I will advise when that is completed. And then there was, we had $660,000 in council assistance fund. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I did provide a full finance update, I believe again, maybe last month or the month before. So I can provide that information to you where we are at with that.
Yeah, thanks, Saskia. That'd be great. And that's the full funding when you take into that, yeah, 1.06 million. Sorry, Councillor Sladen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding, and correct me if I'm incorrect, Ms. Van Beaver, and that is that all the funding has been committed, but it hasn't all been expended, and that we are awaiting approval from Regional Development Victoria and the other funding body to allow us to utilise the funds as per this plan, which was endorsed by the Business and Community Recovery Committee on the 17th of March. So my understanding is that there is no surplus funds available, that it's being committed, but yet to be expended.
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you. That clarifies it. Thank you.
Councillor, is there any other questions? We have a motion. Councillor Sladen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I find it. So the motion is the council endorses the community recovery plan as provided in attachment 1 of this agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Webb. Councillor Sladen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pardon me. As I stated earlier, this is a recovery plan that has been developed with the Business and Community Recovery Advisory Group, BCRAC, and they have had input all through the process. While there is some confirmation, we are awaiting in terms of some government funds about how we can expend the unexpended funds. As I say, they've been committed, but there is some unexpended, and we just need approval from those funding bodies. And in terms of, I mean, this has been a huge amount of money, majority of which has come via the state and some from Commonwealth government in terms of recovery as a result of the current pandemic, and the fact that that pandemic is still going on, that a number of these projects will have long-lasting effects. It's not just, that they haven't been completed. There are events to come and activities to come in the future. And so it will have that ongoing, it is hoped that it will have that ongoing support for the community and the businesses that have been in receipt of this funding. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sladen. Councillor Webb?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mirroring Councillor Sladen's comments around this plan has been a long time coming. In this particular part of the plan, I quite enjoy the empowering the communities, empowering youth aspects of this. So we're not just handing out money, we're creating capacity, particularly in our outlying regions and maybe aspects of the community who are slightly disadvantaged to take care of their own destiny effectively. So I'm a big fan of this plan.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Would anyone like to speak in opposition to the motion? Anyone like to speak further to the motion? Councillor Sladen, would you like to sum up?
No, I don't think so, Mr. Mayor. It's not necessary.
Those in favour of the motion? Thank you. The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 13.3. Thank you, Ms. Van Dier. Thank you. Item 13.3.5. COVID-19 CASI initiative. Quick action activation grants. The responsible officer is Senior Coordinator Community Health and Wellbeing, Jenny Lovick. Welcome, Jenny. Councillors, are there any questions on this document? Councillor Tan?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Lovick. Just one question, and I should know this, but whose life's circle? Theatre performance.
Ms. Lovick is, well, Madam CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Lovick is not in the meeting tonight, and I think that the General Manager of Community and Corporate can answer that question.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I asked Ms. Lovick all the questions I thought you'd ask, and that wasn't one that I thought of. So I'm afraid I'll have to take that particular question on notice.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear Councillor Teen's question, so perhaps I might be able to help. I may not be able to, but if you could ask it again, I'll see what I can do. Thanks, Kurt.
Certainly, Madam CEO. I was just looking at the list of recipients of funds, and I'm not aware of Life Circle, which is one of the 10 or so recipients.
So I'm sorry, I can't answer that in detail. I suspect it's something to do with that followed on from Council's late in life project a couple of years ago. There was an organisation formed from that. I think it's Life Circle. So Council received funds a couple of years ago to run a program with our older residents around that end of life stage. And I recall that a community group then formed from that project. And I'm pretty sure it's Life Circle, but we will confirm it. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam CEO.
I can confirm that, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Tehan, that is the group. Yes, which was born out of that project that the CEO did mention.
Thanks, Councillor Sladen. Any other questions, councillors?
Mr. Mayor, it's not a question, but I just think for the benefit of those who may be listening, we have been using the word or the expression CARSI quite a few times tonight, and I think it's important to just elaborate on that. And CARSI stands for Community Activation and Social Isolation. So this was a state government program. So it was funding made available to all local governments in Victoria to use again in response to the pandemic. So when you hear the word CARSI, that's what it means: community activation and social isolation.
Thanks, Councillor Sladen. Councillors, do we have a motion? Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The motion being that Council endorses the dispersal of CARSI, Quick Action Activation Grant funds, to these successful applicants as listed in tonight's agenda. And point two, thanks all applicants for their applications.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Sladen. Councillor Webb, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sladen.
Only that I'd like to congratulate the groups and to thank everybody for applying, and I'm very pleased to see the amount of funding going to outlying community groups for their infrastructure and activities.
Thanks, Councillor Sladen. Are there anyone else like to speak to this motion? Anyone want to speak against the motion? Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. Item 14, assemblies of councillors. Are there any questions on the assemblies of councillors? Councillor Rabi?
Yeah, just some observations, Mr. Mayor. 3rd of August, councillors briefing session. The GM Community and Corporate Services, I haven't included Kurt's name in there. Everyone else has got a name. The same thing for the 10th of August. Fortunately, Kurt, you're missing again in there. And I was at the meeting on the 10th of August with the Mansfield Matters group. I was not an apology. I was at the meeting. That's it.
Thanks, Councillor Rabi. Councillors, any other questions? Do we have a motion, please, councillors? Councillor Rabi?
I'd like to move the motion that council receive and note the Assembly of Councillors report for the period of 27th of July 2021 to the 10th of August 2021, reflecting changes of 3 points, corrections as mentioned. Words to that might be able to help me out there, corporate governance.
We'll be able to manage that.
You've got the points, thank you.
You get the idea, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Rabi. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Webb? Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. Council Resolution Register, item 15. Do we have a motion, councillors? Councillor Webb?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Motion being that council receive and note the council resolution register as at 20th of July 2021.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Do we have a seconder? No seconder? Councillor Rabi? Oh, sorry, Councillor Sladen? Those in favour of the motion? Motion is passed. Thank you. Item 18 is a closure of the meeting to the members of the public for confidentiality reasons with the next item. Do we have a motion here, councillors? Councillor Ravi?
I'd like to move the motion that the meeting be closed to members of the public under section 66(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider confidential information as defined by section 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020 as council business information being information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released.
Thanks, Councillor Ravi. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Turn. Those in favour of the motion? The motion is passed. Thank you. And the meeting is now to be closed to the public. Thank you. And when we come back after this, we'll come back and to close the meeting in its entirety. Thank you. Is everyone there, councillors? Sorry, Madam CEO.
Mr. Mayor, before you close the meeting, can I just acknowledge that this is Michelle Kane's last council meeting and thank her publicly for her 2.5 years at council, and in particular during my time here, the extraordinary work she did last year in guiding the organisation through the implementation of the new Local Government Act, managing the council election and doing an extraordinary job with the councillor induction program that went over from last year to this year. So on behalf of the organisation, Mr. Mayor, I'd absolutely like to thank Michelle for her great work with council.
Thanks, Madam CEO. And Michelle, on behalf of all the councillors too, I'd really like to thank you and the work you did through that induction process, which was, and also through the budget presentation process, was greatly valued and really appreciated, and a credit to you. So certainly from behalf of councillors, I wish you all the best in your new direction.
Thank you all very much. I'm a bit emotional under my mask. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms.
Yeah. On that note, I think we can close the meeting, councillors, and thank you all, Madam CEO, Ms. Alexander, Mr. Heidecker, and Ms. Kane. Thank you, and Mr. Burchett. Thank you very much for being part of it. Good evening, councillors.
Good evening.
Good night.
Thank you.